Hi everyone, so my name is Rebecca, I'm an ichthyologist and I'm just going to talk about saving money or trying to save money with aquariums because it's a really big thing right now and it's not any good if people just want to quit. We want to keep people in the hobby but also keeping it sustainable because obviously it's not the cheapest hobby and you can make it what you want with the cost of things. So obviously it's a little bit difficult in some ways to save money, but there's plenty of ways you can do it. The big one I would say is if you're setting up a tank, that's going to be the biggest amount of money you're going to spend. So I would consider what you're buying. A lot of things you can get second hand. Bear in mind if they're second hand they likely won't have a warranty. Therefore if they break there's not much you can do about it. And also consider the age of the thing. So tanks, aquariums, their seal is a bit risky. I would say after 10 years, I've seen 20-year-old tanks hold up a bit, but they can go even earlier than that. So consider the age of the tank. And this is probably one of the biggest savings you can make, is going for a second-hand aquarium. These are brand new because of warranty, but second-hand tanks are brilliant and there's plenty around and you can make a massive saving. And do your research. Just because it's second-hand doesn't mean it's the cheapest it's going to be. And if you try different websites, so Pre-Loved, Gumtree, Facebook Marketplace, there will be loads available to buy, and some people will charge more than the tank's worth. So just do your research and be realistic if you're going to propose a price to someone and you think the price of the tank is too high. Obviously a lot of these tanks also come with things. Avoid any tanks that come with fishes in general, because a lot of them tend to be fishes you probably don't want. They probably need an upgrade and they might be long lived. Try and avoid that sort of setting and don't just dump them on stores. Either way, they're likely to come with electronics, and electronics is the hit and miss one second hand. So obviously they don't have a warranty, so if something goes wrong, something's more likely to go wrong with electronics and moving parts. But if it comes through, you might as well use it because you're offsetting that price of it coming brand new or giving it a go. So heaters, I just like to know they warm up, and then I'll keep an eye on them in the tank just in case. But they're probably the things that are most likely to go. Like I've had a heater that did go about a year ago and then I tested it and it's got some electrical issues. But they're probably the one that you're going to have to be most sensitive on. Filters, there's plenty of brilliant filters second hand and they might come with the tank. And some of the most the filters that can run the longest, or the ones that have proven longevity, do come second hand. So and this comes into when you're buying a tank and electronics, is looking at things that will last. So Eheim, I might spend a lot more money on my Eheim filters, but if I'm replacing another external every 2 to 3 years, every 5 years, I'd rather spend double that, maybe even triple that on an external that's going to last 10, 20 years. And there's plenty of spares. A lot of the spares for the Eheims you could buy, or they're take apart old ones. So there's plenty around, and I think really thinking about that longevity thing, especially when it comes to the seals, the impeller. Some filters will last longer than others. So that's probably the most important aspect of when you're thinking about buying those electronics. So I've generally just gone for Eheim because I know they last. And you might notice this internal, this is one I filmed a video on and I'm using it again for a reason I'll explain in a bit. But there's so many things that you can get second hand. Even like decor, you can collect it. I'll do your research on safe wood, safe rocks. Rocks are a bit more iffy, I guess, to identify. Leaf litter, you can also buy cuttings second hand. And stuff like that really. Also, maybe if you want like live bearers, there's plenty of them going around for very little, even tetras. Many different species of tetra, not the rarer ones. So what else? On the sort of, if you're buying stuff, the initial start, also think about whether you need a power head, a skimmer. Most of these you can get second hand. Ideally, I would say filters I prefer to get brand new just for that warranty, because the only thing that's usually not covered is impellers, which isn't really much use really, because that's probably the thing that's most likely to go is that ceramic shaft, which I guess counts as the moving part, which isn't covered usually by warranties. So other things, so these are the main things on saving money while you've got the aquarium set up, because I think that's what most people probably are doing or are in that sort of state, because not many people are going to be buying aquariums so much at the moment or setting up new ones. So the next thing about electronics. Another thing is, so a lot of people look at electronics and think, oh, that one looks good, I'll go for that. It's got this LPH, I'll go for that. But personally, also if you're looking at saving money, compare that LPH, so litres per an hour, to the wattage. You'll find that some of even the cheapest ones to buy might have a really high wattage. And actually sometimes it's worth thinking about, is the price I'm saving worth the loss in wattage, so the cost of the wattage to run. So take, let me grab some, so the watts is easily accessible on the website before you buy things and then on the packaging. But let's take this for example. This is a fluvial power head. This one does 280 litres per an hour, but this costs, I think it'd be around 50-60 now or more. So this is, so what is it again, 5 watts. That one over there is 2.5 watts. It costs about £60. It does around, I think it's 3,000 litres per hour, so it is, what's it, slightly more I think. It is a smaller unit, so the amount of flow would be very different. And then if you take a look at this, so this is 6 watts and does 500 litres now. So this is an internal. It has slightly more wattage than this, but sort of the level of flow is one thing. But and also, I went for this because it's a lot quieter. These are really loud. This is the Fluvial C. I've only got one fluvial electronic running right now because these cut out and they're loud. And the one I've got running is a heater, which is not going to be loud at all. But you can see that wattage is probably what you're going to be thinking about. And like for example, all pond solutions tends to have a really high wattage. So whatever you're saving in the cost, are you going to be saving in electricity? And that also depends on how long you're going to use it. If you're going to use it for years and years, it's very different to if you're going to use it, say, for a year. And therefore, also, what's the longevity? All pond solutions isn't known for lasting long. So maybe you're going to not be saving as much, because then you're going to have to replace it. So you buy the cost of the units over time, like the unit as in like the object. So it's always worth looking at wattage, and some brands have less wattage than others. And also think about what you're using it for. I think when it comes to electronics, also flow, power heads and wave makers you tend to use quite a bit for what they are in a way. And also some filters. And then if you're looking at flow, maybe thinking about what type of flow it produces and how much round the tank. Generally, also think about air stones, air pumps. They use comparably less wattage, I guess, but also they're very difficult to calculate how much flow they're producing. You could do it with an external, air-powered filter to kind of work out what kind of flow rate they're producing. It's very difficult because it also depends on the height, so many different factors, but really thinking about it. I think when it comes to aquariums, putting thought into what you're doing is really important. So one of the other ways I save money is, this is a singular room. This is not a walkway, a kitchen, a living room. Doors are being opened and shut all the time. It's kind of like a climate. It is, east facing. I've had a south facing room, and that means it kind of traps a lot of heat, and therefore I'm heating my aquariums. They're heated to 28.5-ish. Therefore it means there's going to be not as much, I guess, temperature gradient, so they're not going to lose temperature as quickly, and they're going to heat up maybe not as quickly as if it was a much lower temperature. And I think that's really useful, for me anyway, and it's really nice to be in here. And a lot of people will say about mould. I've never had mould. I think it is that it doesn't have those extremes in temperatures. That really helps, and it's not like water builds up anywhere, even on the glass. But I think really think about the climate of the room, maybe having all your aquariums in one room, and if you want a space heater rather than in-tank heaters, that's probably a really good alternative. For me, maybe I don't have as much, because I don't have as many aquariums, obviously that's not going to be as useful, because then I'm heating this whole room to 28. The snake is obviously at a higher temperature, she's going to help. And I treat this room, it is like a greenhouse. I have houseplants in it, and I think really making it into climate is actually more helpful than many think. And yes, they all get direct light. That to me I find really useful, as in I don't need to put on lights because they get direct light. It's never too bright, and I've never had it too bright. So it doesn't promote algae, obviously, because got no algae. When I was changing things, I did get a lot of sediment feeders, and then they've all gone. So I guess the aquariums have stabilised again. And I was switching. I'm looking at the flow rate within the aquarium, but also the wattage with what I already have. So that's why I've cut out an external for each, because that doesn't really change the flow rate so much. It doesn't change flow rate at all. Well, it does a little bit, but it's more about the processing, so I might have to clean the filters more, but that means I save on the electricity cost of running 2 extra externals, which means I have spares if anything breaks as well. But it's all about, I think, really thinking about what you've got, what you can do, and just providing consideration, and think about logic sometimes. So climate of the room I think is really important, and you can, if you like houseplants, it's really good because they've got a warm, maybe a little bit more humid space that they can grow, and loads of light. So yeah, I wouldn't really have anything like a bio window or anything that could create a fire issue. There is a fire risk with having sort of jars of water by a window. So do think about that as well. So next thing is the one that a lot of people don't consider entirely, is looking at temperate species. I can't do that. All the fish I like really warm temperatures, but there's plenty of amazing temperate species, or ones you don't think are temperate and do best at cooler temperatures around, such as, even within cichlids, you've got Gymnogeophagus and I think it's Balenzi, that beautiful hump head in the males. They're very seasonal, with that sort of hump going down, and they're probably, I would say they are easier to breed. I don't know, but they are gorgeous fishes and well worth looking at. Alternatively, you got the whole or most of Corydoras, that are fine without a heater. And the heater is going to be one of your biggest costs, I guess, in terms of wattage, because they are, so that one's 150, that one's 200. They're on and off on the thermostat, which makes them really difficult to predict how much they're producing. And this will depend on that temperature outside as well. So that's why the climate bit comes in. But obviously Corydoras. So temper, I'm really talking about species that are fine in sort of 24 degrees or less, or maybe seasonal. Obviously if they are at 20 or more, depends on the heat in the room. You might say it's a warm house, but I would also have a thermometer just in case. But some of these species I'm talking about are really adaptable, and Corydoras has many. You've got like Corydoras trilineatus, Corydoras palliatus, Corydoras annuus, I would say. Most of the cories really, even the really ornate ones, do best at cooler temperatures or that seasonal variation. So outside Corydoras, what else? Obviously not in the US, but in the UK, snakeheads. A lot of Channa, and it's well worth researching, do best in unheated setups with that seasonal drop in temperature in the winter, or what would it be? I don't know, would it be dry period? But that can also trigger spawning, and they're probably one that many people don't think about when they do best at those cooler temperatures. And you can create beautiful, I've seen some beautiful planted tanks with Channa. Other than them, what else have we got? If you want a Lorocara tank, Plecostomus, many of them prefer those cooler temperatures, and therefore you could have a high flow hill stream setup. And even hill streams, there's many different hill stream loaches that no one even talks about that do best in cooler temperatures, like panda loaches, all the Swellia ventralis. You don't have to always look at lineolatus. And obviously there's weather loaches, fancy goldfish, what else? Lob barbs, Odessa barbs, torpedo barbs, what's it? Ruby barbs. Many of them do better at cooler temperatures and produce much brighter coloration. One of our few fishes in the trade that are from North America and the UK, rainbow shiners, are more likely to produce that really vivid breeding coloration at the cooler temperatures. So there's plenty around, especially if you're looking at a new setup or looking at switching what you've got. So another aspect, time of heating tanks. So a lot of people will know that there is a peak and an off-peak price. Depends on your supplier, not all have them. But think about, if heating costs the most, when is that tank going to be most likely to need that heating? And that's going to be after a water change. So it is really difficult for some suppliers, but looking at your off-peak rate and maybe doing a water change just before, and therefore as the tank's heating up you're being charged less for your electricity on that wattage that's at full blast for the heat. So generally anywhere between after 5, after 7, or after 7, after 8, after 12 p.m. So 12 p.m. is not even practical, but depends on the size of the tank. So this one takes 6 hours to heat up, that one takes longer. Obviously that's got a higher wattage to heat up, so that's used a bit more to heat up quicker than that one. But that means neither really trying to avoid hitting the peak or the higher charge rates for electricity. So maybe doing your water changes at a different time of day, evening. I know it's really annoying because fitting around life round water changes is a pain. So the other thing is thinking about simplicity with what tech and what things you're using, because it's not all about saving money with electronics. Think about, do you need a shipwreck? Do you need this decor? Do you need this chemical? Is there other ways to do it? And one thing is also, people really underestimate rainwater, and in the countryside it's more of a possibility. In the cities, definitely not. As alternative to RO. And then you remineralising it, treating it's still going to be cheaper than using RO. Obviously with RO it's running on water costs so much, but it's a saving where possible. And thinking just about the setup, you don't need, a lot of people judge so much on aesthetics, and if you like aesthetics of a tank, that's up to you, but I always think it's always nicer to focus on the fish and the fish's welfare. So doing what's best for fish. I don't need all this planted setup that the plants, especially if you're going to replace the plants, because some people do replace the plants all the time, like cut flowers. So really just considering that, I think, is important. Just to, you don't need to have all this extra stuff, and electronics, you don't need some of the gadgets that you can get. Some are really fun to use, like I love my ink birds and they're actually really useful, and also saving from disasters. If it overheats, if it cuts off, I know on my phone. Obviously they use a little bit of wattage. But think about different things like UV sterilizer. That uses quite a bit of wattage just because you got the lamp, and then it also cuts out flow a bit. So do you really need that? And what power heads are you using? Maybe an air stone, but also don't just cut out things to save money again if it sacrifices the fish, because that's where you really need to think about it, I think. So if you want that flow, thinking about flow, but more than just litres per an hour. And a lot of fishes, they do experience a lot of velocity of water, but also think about that oxygen circulation. That's probably the most important thing. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you like my videos, please comment, like, subscribe, and thank you for watching.